So today I'm going to talk about the other 3%, but actually I was being very generous because right now more than 99%, as you very rightfully said, of the stablecoin markets is in dollars. And that has some effects. And I would like to dive into that, what it actually means, what that means on different levels, and what we should, or if we should do something about that. Now, if you look at stablecoins, most people always talk about transactions, moving value from one party to another. Cross-border transactions, payments, settlements, all those kind of things. Now, I argue there is a second use case, and that second use case is a store of value. You want to be able to hold your assets somewhere, which might be gold, might be Bitcoin, but you might want to have something which is a bit less volatile and which is, well, should hold value. And that's really what I'm interested in. Now, if we think about transactions, you have to think about how the world was before. On legacy rails, you typically have a T+2 or T+1 settlement. There's a lot of money stuck in transit, really. There's just like a substantial, I don't have a number here actually how much it is, but I think it's in the teens or in the tweens even. Part of the money supply is just constantly stuck somewhere being sent from A to B in a settlement layer, in a collateral layer, and so on. And that money needs to be minted. That is money supply. Now, when we think about stablecoins, in general, settlement becomes basically immediate. Think about Ethereum, you have a 10-second settlement time. With other stablecoins, with other layer ones, that's even shorter, sub 1 second. But even with 10 seconds, there is no transit risk. No one is really holding it. It doesn't really matter how the asset you're exchanging in is moving. And that has a profound effect on how financial rails can work, right? You don't need a dollar to hold it. It's just a momentary thing. So if I want to go, let's say I'm Swiss, right? I like the Swiss franc, but maybe someone likes gold. They can have their assets in gold perpetually. They don't need to hold dollars or whatever to spend it. Just at the moment, when you do the transaction, you want to have one liquid currency or one liquid asset in which you can swap into very efficiently, and that is, again, it can be, we're not there yet, but it can be, on a technical level, a lot more efficient than it can be with traditional rails, and you immediately swap out of it anymore. So you don't have to have like multiple legs and multiple venues. It's enough if you have one shared asset which is just liquid to everyone. And this is somewhat an explanation of why the dollar is so dominant in this space. And that is good, right? You don't need more. You just have very, very small assets you want to hold, and then if you want to exchange, you go via the dollar. But you don't really hold it, right? You just go in and out again. And if you think about what are stablecoins actually, now I know I'm in the US now, and I was on stage yesterday in Paris, for example, with the Bank of England, with the British Central Bank, and they have very, very strong opinions on this. Because effectively, every stablecoin dollar, Tether or Circle, or even the decentralized ones, in fact, what you're holding is some form of US Treasury, because there's someone taking out the yield somewhere, but they're not actually even giving it to you, which is even worse. That's kind of the worst part, right? You hold the risk of the US Treasury, but you don't get paid for it. And we see that quite nicely here. Tether is actually one of the largest holders of US government debt. And I just pulled this little list yesterday, and you can see it's in between Israel and South Korea. I think there's not a single private player that is even closely holding that much US Treasury bonds. Now, from the US perspective, this is obviously very nice, because you can finance yourself like this. You have people who buy your Treasury bonds. From a sovereign perspective from other countries, they don't like that very much, because they would like to sell their own govies, right? And not just that everyone just buys the American ones. And this is kind of this overview of, and I'm just now referencing to that panel I had yesterday with the French bank, the Bank of England, the head economist of State Street. And I was kind of the odd one out because the Swiss people have different problems. But they were all saying, hey, either we do something about this now, and we actually level the playing field, and we become players in that market, and we create regulation that allows us to, play the game, or the dollar is just going to eat the world, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's just a nugget of where the policymakers stand in the European Union. Switzerland is different. Because Switzerland is more on that side, right? Because I was now always talking about transactions. And if you hold value, so if you want to stay in that currency, and if you look at stablecoins as a store of value, then the denomination starts to matter, because it's not a 10-second exposure anymore. It is now, it can be years, it can be decades. And the dollar is not a very good store of value. I just put that here into the room. I know I'm in the US. But I'm basically here making this point that this is the Swiss franc versus the US dollar since 1975. It's about, I think, 300% appreciation in value. And it's not doesn't look like it's stopping. Now, this is the other side of that same medal, right? And it's also geopolitically from the US, it's something they want. From Switzerland, not so much, because Switzerland is an export country. So Switzerland doesn't like to have too much of a strong Swiss franc. But US investors, you can actually use that. And that's where I'm making my case for Frankencoin. I've not said a word about Frankencoin yet, but what is Frankencoin? Frankencoin is actually the digital version of the Swiss franc, right? We're the largest decentralized Swiss franc stablecoin. Currently about, and this is all in Swiss francs, so in dollar it's a bit more. It's about 80 million US dollars in TVL. You have a very high yield on it, and it's super liquid, and it's fully decentralized. So basically what you're getting with this is an asset that is not depreciating, but it's just holding its value, and you have control over it. There's no bank that can lock your account, that can take the money away from you. It's yours. And I think this is a pretty interesting value proposition for big parts of the world that do not necessarily want to be exposed to an extractive financial system. I was just supporting that, right? It's not an issue at holding reserves. It's fully decentralized. And I just want to close this, and why I'm here, why am I doing this keynote, is really I want to kind of open the eyes, saying, okay, well, what do stablecoins do, right? It's transactions one thing, which many people, or the majority, is just talking about, but there's also this other side of things for the store of value, for holding your assets, and that's where we need to have diversity, and that's where this other 1%, or we want to build out this into at least 3%. Come in and are there to be a hedge against turmoil, to be accessible, to be held, and to be globally accessible. I have brought a book just to finish up. It's the history of the Swiss franc over the last 250 years. People who've seen me speak before maybe have actually seen that book. I am more than happy to give it away. So if you want one, sometimes I do a question. I'm not doing that today, but if you would like that book, come to me and happy to give it to you. It's a quite interesting thing, because it very nicely shows what is a currency? Where does the value of a currency come from over a longer period of time, and how intertwined it is with the political environment, with the geopolitical environment, and even with the cultural environment of periods and of countries. And I have 40 seconds, so one last sentence. Now, we're in 2026. I'm rather young. There's some people who are older than me in this room. There's some people who are younger than me. But going very deep into currencies, the one thing I would say is, do not expect the status quo, how it is now, to be the status quo in 10 years. Because things change, and currency environments can change very, very quickly. And not because they've been like this for 5 years, they will be like this for the next 5 years. Thank you very much. I think I have time for one question, maybe. Yes?
Thank you very much for this question I have is how do you manage the DPEG risk?
DPEG risk. So this is CDP. That would be completely on other keynote. Happy to go into it, but it's basically.
Given your collateral.
Yes, exactly. So it comes down to collateral risk management, right? The collateral basket. What is it backed by? How much is it over collateralized? And then you want to have a look at how do you manage DPEG risk short term, which is a lot harder than long term because short term it's market forces, right? It's market making basically. While long term you say, okay, as long as the collateral is worth more than the asset which is issued against it, there should not be DPEG, theoretically.
Continues,
yes?
it will be worth less because Swiss franc would appreciate.
Against the dollar, yeah, but that depends exactly. That depends what you have as a collateral. That's why there's a lot of gold, for example, in there. Or Swiss franc denominated assets, which is the hard part. Thank you very much.